Dear Journal, Omar and I have been the best of friends since grade school. I lost my older brother Frankie 3 years ago to a senseless act of violence. Omar has been my next-door neighbor and my brother from another mother for as long as I can remember. We have always been there for each other and kept each other balanced. Omar was so much of an anchor for me. He helped keep me grounded. In most cases, boys like us from our neighborhood on the south side of Chicago were not always first to be taken seriously academically. It seems the only way out was if we had a ball or a microphone in our hands. Omar and I were determined to make it out a different way. We had to, and we both had our reasons. My reason surrounded the idea of doing it for my brother, who would never get the chance to. My older brother, Frank, who was known to all of us as Frankie the Goat Harris, was 2 years older than me, and was on his way to being an amazing athlete. He played many sports in high school, basketball, football, ran track, and was also on the baseball team for a couple years. Frankie's first love was basketball and everyone knew it. My brother was a beast. He caught more bodies on the court than those fools did in the streets. My boy was trouble. He messed around one game and managed a triple-double. I was in awe of my brother and his biggest fan. I mean, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson needed this man for real, for real. Every game it was and one, swish, nothing but net. My brother had a dream of making it to the NBA eventually, but he also wanted to go to college. He didn't want to be labeled a statistic. He wanted to be an example for me and make our mom proud as a way of trying to pay her back for being such an awesome single mother. My dad left us before I was born, and Mom stepped up and took up his slack. So staying out the way and out of trouble was the least we could do to show her how much we loved and appreciated her. My brother was smart, funny, and kind. He was a ladies' man, and I looked up to him and learned a lot from him, and you can say we were a lot alike. The day we lost Frankie was so painful for me and my family. Frankie had a game that Friday night, and our mom was working another double shift, preparing to pay for Frankie's upcoming senior trip and senior dues. Frankie would be going to college in the fall, not only on a basketball scholarship, but also on an academic scholarship, which would give him a full college ride. We were beyond proud of him. It was the last game of the season, at which I would usually be in attendance. However, I was at home sick and my mom refused to allow me to go to the game with a fever. I listened to the game over the phone because Omar was there. The game was epic and we won 71-70. I remember talking to Omar until his mom came to pick him up and he was on his way home. I started to fall asleep shortly after getting off the phone with Omar. I would usually stay up and wait for Frankie to get home, and we would stay up and talk about his stats and how many shots and assists he made in the game, but I guess I was sicker than I thought. I figured we would just talk about it in the morning. Morning came, as the morning sun started to beam through my window. I heard the loud squeaky front door open, knowing my mom was just getting home. I was feeling much better than the night before, and decided to get up and fix Mom some breakfast so she could take a hot shower and get some rest before the start of her next shift later that night. Before I could get out of bed, Mom came into my room wanting to know where Frankie was. She said he wasn't in his room and his bed did not look slept in at all. I said maybe he went for a run this morning. My mom said, "When has Frankie ever made up his bed in the morning without me having to tell him 1,000,000 times?" I said, "Mom, don't worry, I'll just call his cell phone. The cold medicine had me out like a light last night, so maybe I was asleep when he came in. Or maybe he decided to spend the night at one of his teammates' house, without calling me or leaving a note?" Mom asked. I called Frankie's phone 3 times, and it didn't even ring. It went straight to voicemail. So wherever he was probably sleeping and didn't have a charger. A few hours passed as we waited to hear from Frankie. Mom was beginning to worry more and more. I tried to calm her with my famous bacon, egg, and cheese breakfast burritos. She sat down at the kitchen table after getting out of the shower. I could tell from her only taking a few bites of my delicious burrito that she didn't have much of an appetite. Her anxiety was starting to take control. Growing up on the south side of Chicago, Mom worried about us a lot, and we both tried to ease that for her by just trying to stay out of trouble. I was sure Frankie was fine and had just forgotten to check in with us after such an epic win. I excused myself and told Mom I was going to go call some of Frankie's teammates. He was probably over at one of their houses. Mom told me, after I find out where he is, to tell Frankie to come home immediately. I called several of Frankie's teammates who didn't remember seeing him much after they arrived back at the school after their away game. Jason said he remembered Frankie had to use the restroom before getting on the bus, but couldn't remember seeing him after that. That bothered me. I began to worry. Had my brother gotten on the bus? Did they leave without him? Nah, I'm pretty sure they would have noticed if their star player was not on the bus. I invited Omar over. When Omar knocked on the door, I remember my mom running out her room hoping it was Frankie. The disappointment written on her face was heartbreaking to say the least. Omar said if he didn't know she was so worried about Frankie, he would have been offended. He hugged my mom tightly and said, "Don't worry, Mama T. Frankie will be home soon, and then Tyree and I will hold him down while you go get your belt." He made my mom smile, and I was grateful for that. My mom went back to her room, and Omar and I went upstairs to try and figure out where Frankie could be. Omar remembered Frankie recently started talking back to his ex-girlfriend Sasha, and maybe he went by there last night. I said Mom would be pissed. Maybe he woke up late and is trying to figure out a good cover story before he comes home. I told Omar he would have called me by now, though. Omar tried to lighten the mood by saying maybe Sasha has one of those Android phones and Frankie doesn't have his iPhone charger with him. Needless to say, Omar was team iPhone. We decided to go with the whole Sasha scenario because it made the most sense to us. Sasha lived just a few streets over, so we decided to go pay the little lovebirds a visit. As we were walking back downstairs, a knock landed heavy and strong on the front door. Mama came out of her room again and said, "Ty, if that's another one of your little friends and not my baby Frankie, I'm going to hurt you, boy." Mama opened the front door just as Omar and I came up behind her. It was 2 police officers. Mama's knees went weak and Omar caught her before she fell to the ground. Frankie was found dead, his life cut short in a senseless act of violence, jealousy, and rage. The entire town was shook and was left in shock searching for answers that seemed elusive. No one could understand why someone would want to harm Frankie, a funny, kind-hearted golden boy loved by all who knew him. 3 boys from the rival team, who couldn't take losing, were arrested that weekend. Amidst the grief and confusion of losing my brother, I found solace in a journal that Frankie had left behind. He wrote about all the times he was approached by nonsense on a daily basis by guys who wanted him to join gangs, sell drugs, and do horrible things. They even tried to tempt him with monetary gain, which his words showed he considered for just the briefest of moments because he knew what it would mean for our family. Frankie wrote that even Jesus was tempted. In his journal, he wrote about how my mom and I were his motivation to do things the right way to show me a better way. Frankie was young when our father left our mom pregnant and broken, and I never knew him. Frankie wanted to be that example, that role model that we both needed. I had to follow his path. I knew he was still watching over us from heaven, and I wanted him to know that the example he set was not in vain. I started journal writing myself. I also got Omar into journal writing as well. It was our outlet. We needed it. The love I have for my brother kept me motivated to keep going. I wanted to set that example for someone else too. I didn't have another sibling, but I made sure Omar was on board. And every brother we came in contact with, we showed them it was a different way to be and a different route to take. Omar and I grew to be that example in our community. We were now 2 golden boys. We had finished our senior year of high school and were headed to college in the fall. Throughout school, we held each other accountable, and we didn't let the other fall off or get caught up in any craziness. We had each other's back, and I loved him for that. I turned out to be more like my brother Frankie than I could ever hope or dream of, and my mom couldn't have been prouder. I was now headed to college to major in computer engineering on an athletic and academic full ride, just like my brother. Omar, who had never been very good at sports, was going to be my college roommate, just like we had always planned, on a full academic scholarship. Thanks to Frankie, I was going to be the man I wanted and needed to be for our family, and our mom was going to be well taken care of. Always Tyree.